The day we said no more, Captain Elena Vasquez floated in the command module of her research vessel, watching in horror as the Cytherian enforcement ships tore apart the Prometheus station. The human research facility had been humanity's pride, a gleaming symbol of scientific achievement orbiting the outer rim of the Sol system. Now it was nothing but twisted metal and escaping atmosphere, drifting like cosmic debris against the starfield. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Cytherian vessel, reported Lieutenant Davis, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Elena straightened in her chair. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, revealing the cold, crystalline features of a Cytherian commander. Their species looked like living sculptures carved from blue ice, beautiful and utterly without warmth. Human vessel, the alien spoke in perfect, emotionless English. You will withdraw immediately. The Prometheus station was conducting research beyond the parameters allowed by the Terran Limitation Accord. Its destruction was necessary to maintain galactic stability. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. The Prometheus station had been researching faster-than-light communication, technology that could help scattered human colonies stay in contact. Nothing weaponized, nothing threatening. But according to the treaty, humans weren't allowed to develop anything that might give them an advantage in space. That station housed 3,000 researchers and their families. Elena said, her voice deadly quiet. What about them? The Cytherian's expression didn't change. Acceptable losses in service of the greater good. The Terran Limitation Accord clearly states that violations will result in immediate corrective action. Your species agreed to these terms 50 years ago. Elena wanted to scream that humanity had agreed to those terms at gunpoint after the aliens had demonstrated their ability to crack Earth's crust like an eggshell. Instead, she said, "Understood. We're withdrawing now." The transmission ended, and Elena stared at the wreckage of what had been humanity's greatest achievement. 3,000 people dead because they had dared to dream of connecting the stars. She opened the secure channel back to Earth. This is Captain Vasquez to Earth Command. The Prometheus incident is confirmed. We need to talk. Back on Earth, Ambassador Marcus Jean was having the worst day of his 50-year diplomatic career. He sat in his office at the United Nations building, staring at official documents that made his blood boil. According to the papers before him, the Galactic Council was demanding a tribute levy from Earth. 10,000 human workers would be selected for voluntary service. In alien systems, Marcus knew what voluntary meant in galactic politics. It meant slavery with extra steps. His personal communicator chimed with an emergency message. Marcus read it twice, not believing what he was seeing. His daughter Sarah and her husband were on the list of volunteers. They had been selected because of their skills in terraforming technology, the message explained. Their 4-year-old son would remain on Earth to ensure their cooperation. Marcus stood up so fast his chair crashed to the floor. For 50 years, he had been humanity's voice in galactic politics. He had smiled and negotiated and compromised while aliens treated his species like children, who couldn't be trusted with sharp objects. He had convinced himself that diplomacy was the only way forward, that humanity needed to prove they were civilized before they could be treated as equals. But they had taken his family. Marcus activated his secure communication system and sent coded messages to 3 people. Dr. Sarah Park at the Lunar Research Facility, General Thomas Wright at NORAD, and Captain Elena Vasquez, who was currently racing back from the Prometheus disaster. The message was simple. Emergency Protocol 7, the bunker, tonight, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that officially didn't exist. 4 of Earth's most important leaders gathered around a table that had been waiting for this moment for decades. The room was shielded against all forms of surveillance, hidden so deep that even the most advanced alien sensors couldn't penetrate it. Dr. Sarah Park arrived first. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that held the wisdom of someone who had spent 30 years secretly developing technology that the aliens thought impossible for humans to create. She had been working in the shadows, preparing for the day when humanity might need to defend itself. General Thomas Wright came next. He was a tall, weathered man who had spent his career planning for wars that he prayed would never come. But he had never stopped planning, never stopped preparing. Hidden in secret facilities around the world, he had weapons and strategies that would surprise the galaxy. Captain Elena Vasquez entered with fire in her eyes and rage in her heart. She had watched 3,000 innocent people die today, and she was done being diplomatic about it. Ambassador Marcus Chen was the last to arrive. And when he did, he carried with him the weight of 50 years of humiliation and a burning need to save his family. Gentlemen, lady, Marcus began, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. I believe we've reached the point we've all been dreading and preparing for. The question is simple. Do we continue to accept our place as second-class citizens in our own galaxy? Or do we remind the universe what humans are capable of when we stop asking for permission? Dr. Park leaned forward. The technology is ready. We've been secretly developing it for decades. Quantum drives that make their fastest ships look like rowboats. Weapons that can adapt to any defense. Communication systems that work faster than light. We've been ready for years. General Wright nodded grimly. Military preparations are complete. We have hidden bases and systems they don't even know we can reach. Our true fleet numbers aren't 12 ships like they think. It's closer to 1,200. We've been building and training in secret since the day we signed that cursed treaty. Elena looked around the table. The Prometheus station wasn't just a research facility. It was a test. They wanted to see how far they could push us before we pushed back. 3,000 dead people is their answer. Marcus pulled out his personal copy of the Terran Limitation Accord, the document that had caged humanity for half a century. The treaty was written on special paper that was supposed to be indestructible, a symbol of the permanent nature of humanity's subjugation. For 50 years, Marcus said, we've honored this treaty. We've stayed in our assigned systems. We've limited our technology. We've sent tribute when demanded. We've smiled and begged for scraps of respect from species that see us as useful pets. He stood up, holding the treaty in both hands. But they made one crucial mistake. They forgot that humans are predators. We evolved from hunters who brought down creatures 10 times our size through cunning, persistence, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. For 50 years, we've been pretending to be prey. Today, that ends. Marcus tore the treaty in half. The sound echoed through the bunker like a gunshot. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dr. Park started to smile. General Wright nodded approvingly. Captain Vasquez began to laugh, a sound with no humor in it, but plenty of promise. Dr. Park, Marcus said, how long do you need to activate our hidden networks? Give me 6 hours and every human colony in the galaxy will be connected through quantum communication. The aliens won't even know it's happening until it's done. General Wright, what about our military assets? The moment you give the word, we can have combat-ready fleets in 12 different systems. Our true strength has been hidden for decades, waiting for this moment. Captain Vasquez, I want you to command our response fleet. When the aliens come to punish us for breaking the treaty, I want them to face something they've never seen before. Elena smiled, and it was a predator's smile. It will be my pleasure, sir. The next morning, Marcus Chen stood before the cameras in the United Nations building. Behind him was a massive screen showing the torn pieces of the Terran Limitation Accord. The broadcast was being sent not just to Earth, but to every human colony in the galaxy, and to the Galactic Council itself. People of Earth, and humans throughout the stars, Marcus began. Today, we announce that humanity will no longer accept the chains that have bound us for 50 years. The Terran Limitation Accord is hereby null and void. We reject the authority of any government that treats intelligent beings as property to be traded and resources to be exploited. The camera zoomed in on Marcus's face, showing eyes that burned with determination. To the Galactic Council, we say this: you have mistaken our patience for weakness, our diplomacy for cowardice, and our restraint for inability. You demanded tribute from our people, treating them as slaves. You destroyed our research station, murdering 3,000 innocent civilians. You have forgotten that humans are not prey animals to be herded and controlled. Marcus picked up the pieces of the treaty and held them up to the camera. This document promised us protection in exchange for our freedom. Instead, it delivered oppression disguised as order. We trusted you to treat us fairly, and you repaid that trust with exploitation and contempt. But you made one fatal error. In your calculations, the screen behind Marcus changed, showing images of human colonies across the galaxy, space stations that looked much more advanced than anything the aliens thought humans possessed, and fleets of ships that shouldn't have existed according to the treaty. The screen behind Marcus changed, showing images of human colonies across the galaxy, space stations that looked much more advanced than anything the aliens thought humans possessed, and fleets of ships that shouldn't have existed according to the treaty. You assumed that what you could see was all we had. You believed that the limitations you placed on us were the limits of our capabilities. You thought that because we obeyed your laws, we had forgotten how to break them. Marcus smiled, and across the galaxy, alien leaders felt a chill they couldn't explain. You were wrong. Within hours of the broadcast, Cytherian enforcement fleets were moving toward the Sol system. Commander Zethkai led the largest punitive force ever assembled, consisting of 50 capital ships and their escort vessels. It was more than enough firepower to crack a planet's crust or boil away its oceans. These humans think they can defy the Council, Zethkai told his subordinates as they prepared to jump to light speed. We will remind them why their species agreed to the limitations in the first place. When we are finished, there will be no more human rebellions. But as the Cytherian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Commander Zethkai saw something that made no sense. Instead of the 12 primitive ships that intelligence reports claimed comprised humanity's entire space navy, his sensors were detecting over 200 vessels arranged in defensive formations throughout the system. This is impossible, Zethkai muttered, studying the tactical displays. Where did these ships come from? His science officer looked up from her console with confusion in her crystalline features. Commander, these vessels are using technology. That's not in our databases. Their energy signatures don't match anything we've seen from human ships before. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first true warship. Around her, the hidden fleet that had been built in secret over 5 decades moved into attack formation. Each ship was equipped with technology that the aliens had forbidden humans to develop, powered by drives that made their vessels look like ancient relics. Attention Cytherian fleet. Elena broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Navy. You are trespassing in human space without permission. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Commander Zethkai? Response came quickly. Human, you will surrender immediately. Your species has violated the Terran Limitation Accord and must face punishment. Resistance is futile. Elena looked around her bridge at officers who had trained their entire careers for this moment. Commander, you seem to be operating under the mistaken belief that we still recognize your authority. We don't. Last chance to withdraw peacefully. Impossible. Begin the attack. The Cytherian fleet opened fire with weapons that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Energy beams that could melt through planetary shields struck the human ships with devastating force. But something was wrong. The human vessels didn't explode or break apart. Instead, their shields seemed to absorb the energy and grow stronger. What is this? Zethkai demanded. How are their shields withstanding our weapons? Dr. Sarah Park had spent 30 years developing adaptive shield technology in secret. The systems didn't just defend against energy weapons they learned from them. Analyzing the attack patterns and adjusting their defenses in real time. What should have been devastating strikes made the human ships more powerful. Elena watched the alien weapon strikes bounce harmlessly off her shields. All ships returned fire. Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like when we stop asking for permission. The human fleet unleashed weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. Quantum torpedoes that could phase through normal shields and strike directly at a ship's hull. Energy beams that adapted their frequency to match whatever they encountered, making defense nearly impossible. Drone swarms that could think and adapt faster than any organic crew. Within the first hour of battle, 15 Cytherian ships had been destroyed or disabled. The aliens found themselves facing enemies that fought unlike anything they had ever encountered. Human tactics were unpredictable, constantly changing. Using strategies that seemed to evolve during the battle itself, Commander Zethkai watched in horror as his overwhelming force was systematically dismantled by ships that shouldn't have been able to scratch his hull plating. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships, emergency withdrawal." But Elena wasn't finished. "Pursuit course," she ordered. "Let them run, but make sure they carry a message back to their masters." As the surviving Cytherian ships fled toward hyperspace, human fighters harassed them all the way to the edge of the system. Not to destroy them, but to make sure they would. Never forget what they had seen. When predators stopped pretending to be prey, the news of humanity's victory yet. Soul spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In the crystal spires of the Cytherian homeworld, in the hive cities of the Zeltron Collective, in the floating palaces of the Ethereal Council, alien leaders struggled to understand what had happened. The humans, the primitive species that had been barely tolerated for 50 years, had just destroyed the most powerful enforcement fleet in galactic history. High Arbiter Velthus of the Galactic Council stood before the great assembly chamber, his 6 arms gesturing frantically as he tried to explain the impossible to representatives of 300 species. Velthus was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived race, and in his 4,000 years of life, he had never encountered a situation like this. The humans possessed technology that our intelligence networks never detected, he reported. To the assembled delegates, ships that shouldn't exist, weapons that adapt during combat, shields that grow stronger when attacked. Either our surveillance of their species has been completely incompetent for 5 decades, or they have been deliberately deceiving us. In the delegates section, Ambassador Creeler of the Zeltron Collective raised one of her 4 hands. "High Arbiter, how is such deception possible? We have monitors in every human system. We inspect their facilities regularly. Their military was limited to 12 vessels by treaty." Balthos' main eyes focused on her, while his auxiliary eyes continued to scan the chamber. "Ambassador, it appears that what we were monitoring and inspecting was what the humans wanted us to see. Their real capabilities were hidden in ways we never imagined. Across the galaxy, on the mining world of Kepler 442b, something extraordinary was happening. For 30 years, the planet had been worked by a combination of human colonists and alien overseers, extracting valuable minerals for the Galactic Council. The humans lived in simple settlements, using basic technology to fulfill their quotas like obedient servants. But today, the mountain that housed the main mining operation split open like an egg, revealing a massive structure that had been hidden beneath the surface. What emerged was not a mining facility, but a fully operational shipyard that had been constructing vessels in secret for decades. Colony. Administrator Janet Torres stood on the observation deck of what had appeared to be a simple processing plant, watching as the first ships of the Hidden Fleet powered up their engines. Torres had spent 30 years pretending to be a struggling colonial administrator, filing reports about equipment failures and resource shortages while secretly overseeing one of humanity's greatest achievements. Torres told hidden colonies she broadcast over the quantum communication network that Dr. Park had activated. Operation Sunlight is go. All assets are to reveal themselves immediately. Across 12 star systems, human colonies that had seemed like simple farming communities or struggling mining operations revealed their true nature. Research stations emerged from underground complexes. Defense platforms rose from seemingly empty asteroid fields. Shipyards that had been disguised as cargo depots began launching vessels that had been secretly under construction for decades. the galaxy suddenly discovered that humanity's presence was far larger and more sophisticated than anyone had realized. On the garden world of Eden Prime, Dr. Michael Jang was having a conversation that would change galactic politics forever. Jang had been the human liaison to the Vorth, a species of peaceful herbivores who had been subjugated by the Cytherian Empire 3 centuries ago. The Vorth were excellent engineers and scientists, but their pacifist nature made them easy targets for more aggressive species. Dr. Jang, said Elder Thyma, her flower-like face displaying the complex color patterns that indicated deep concern. We have heard of your species' rebellion against the Council. This troubles us greatly. Resistance has only brought suffering. In our experience, Jang nodded respectfully. The Vorth were among the few alien species that humans genuinely liked and respected. Elder Thyma, I understand your fear. But humanity has learned something over the past 50 years that I think your people might find useful. What is that? Sometimes the only way to stop being prey is to remind the predators that you still have teeth. Jang activated a holographic display that showed the battle at Sol, the revelation of the hidden colonies, and the true extent of human capabilities. For 50 years, we've been gathering intelligence, building strength, and waiting for the right moment. But we haven't been doing it alone. The display changed to show detailed surveys of Vorth worlds, including information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. We know about the resistance cells in your cities, the hidden weapon caches your people have been building. Despite your pacifist beliefs, the communications network you use to coordinate between worlds, we've been watching, and we've been impressed. Elder Thyma's colors shifted to patterns Jang had never seen before. You know of our preparations? We know, we respect them, and we want to help. Humanity is not seeking to conquer or control. We're seeking allies who believe that intelligent beings should be free to choose their own destiny. Within hours of Jang's conversation with Elder Thyma, the Vorth resistance networks began coordinating with human forces. The galaxy's most gentle species had decided that gentleness was a luxury they could no longer afford. Similar conversations were happening throughout the galaxy. The Broken Chain Coalition, a loose alliance of species that had been conquered by the major powers, suddenly found themselves with a powerful new ally. Humanity offered technology, tactical support, and something that had been missing from galactic politics for centuries. Hope. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as her fleet emerged from hyperspace near the Cytherian military fortress at Rigel 7. The installation was supposedly impregnable, protected by shields that could withstand planetary bombardment and defended by a fleet of 200 warships. Captain, reported her tactical officer, we're detecting massive energy buildups from the fortress. They're powering up their main defense grid. Elena smiled grimly. Rigel 7 wasn't just a military base. It was where the Cytherians processed tribute slaves from conquered worlds. According to intelligence reports, over 10,000 beings were being held there, including the families of humans who had been taken as volunteers. All ships begin attack pattern Prometheus, Elena ordered. The name was deliberate. 3,000 people had died at the Prometheus station, and Elena intended to make the Cytherians pay for every single life. The human fleet didn't attack the fortress directly. Instead, they deployed Dr. Park's latest innovation, quantum mines that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The weapons phased through the fortress's shields and materialized inside the structure itself, disrupting critical systems from within. Impossible. Commander Zethkai, who had been assigned to defend Rigel 7 after his humiliating defeat at Sol, watched his supposedly invincible fortress begin to shut down piece by piece. Their weapons are appearing inside our shields. Elena's voice came over the communication system, cold and implacable. Commander Zethkai, this is Captain Vasquez. You have 30 minutes to release all sentient beings being held as slaves in your facility and surrender your forces. After that, we stop being polite. You cannot threaten us, Zethkai responded. This fortress has never fallen in 500 years of operation. Then I guess today will be memorable, Elena replied. 29 minutes and counting. The Battle of Rigel 7 lasted exactly 27 minutes. When it was over, the fortress that had been the symbol of Cytherian power for centuries was a drifting hulk, its shields down and its weapons silenced. But Elena had kept her word about being polite. The structure was disabled, not destroyed, and every being inside was evacuated before the final systems failed. Among the rescued prisoners was Ambassador Marcus Chen's daughter Sarah and her husband. When they were brought aboard the Defiance, Marcus was waiting for them in the docking bay with tears in his eyes and a smile that could have powered a small star, but the victory at Rigel 7 was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, the old order was crumbling as species after species rose up against their oppressors. The Vorth used their engineering skills to disable the control collars that had kept them enslaved. The Silicon Lords awakened from the enforced hibernation that had kept them docile for centuries. The Aquatic Collective emerged from their deep ocean worlds with technology that the surface dwellers had never imagined. High Arbiter Velthus found himself facing a crisis that threatened to tear apart the galactic order that had existed for 3,000 years. Emergency sessions were called, fleets were mobilized, and threats were made. But for the first time in galactic history, those threats rang hollow. The species that had once cowered before the council's might now had hope. They had seen that the mighty could fall, that the oppressed could rise, and that freedom was possible. For those brave enough to fight for it. The humans have made a grave error, Velthus declared to the Galactic Council. They believe that their military victories make them safe. But they have only one world, one system, one species. We have hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships, millions of warriors. We will crush this rebellion and remind the galaxy why the Council's rule has endured for millennia. But even as Velthus spoke, his intelligence officers were delivering reports that contradicted his confident words. Human ships were appearing in systems that should have been impossible for them to reach. Their technology was advancing at a rate that defied understanding. Most disturbing of all, they weren't fighting like conquerors seeking to expand their territory. They were fighting like liberators, freeing enslaved populations and then withdrawing, leaving behind grateful allies and advanced defensive technology. Dr. Sarah Park was working around the clock in her laboratory on Luna, developing new technologies to help humanity's growing alliance. But her most important project wasn't a weapon or a shield. It was something far more dangerous to the established order, a universal translation and communication network that allowed any species to speak with any other species instantly across galactic distances. For the first time in galactic history, the oppressed could coordinate with each other without their oppressors listening in. Slave populations could share information about resistance activities. Conquered worlds could plan coordinated uprisings. Free species could offer support and resources to those still fighting for liberation. The galaxy was changing, and the old powers were beginning to realize that their reign of control was ending. General Thomas Wright stood in the war room beneath NORAD, studying tactical displays that showed the changing balance of power across known space. 3 months ago, the Galactic Council had controlled 847 worlds through force and intimidation. Today, that number had dropped to 623 and was falling daily. General, reported Colonel Sarah Martinez, his chief intelligence officer, we're receiving surrender offers from 12 different council species. They want to negotiate separate peace treaties. Wright nodded. This was what he had expected. The council wasn't a monolithic alliance. It was a collection of species held together by mutual fear and the promise of shared plunder. When that system stopped working, the alliance would fracture. What about the major powers? Wright asked. The Cytherians, the Ethereals, the Zeltron Collective, still organizing for a massive counterattack. Our intelligence suggests they're planning to field over 10,000 ships in a final assault on human space. Wright smiled grimly. Good. Let them come all at once. It's time to end this war decisively. 6 months after Ambassador Marcus Chen, had torn up the Terran Limitation Accord, the largest fleet in galactic history, assembled at the edge of human space. 10,000 ships from dozens of species, all united in their determination to crush the human rebellion and restore the old order. High Arbiter Velthus commanded the fleet personally, determined to oversee humanity's destruction. As he looked out at the vast armada surrounding his flagship, he felt confident that victory was assured. No single species could stand against such overwhelming force. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Show these humans the price of defying the natural order." The Allied fleet moved toward the Sol system like a metal tide, weapons charged and shields raised. They expected to face desperate resistance from an outnumbered enemy fighting for their homeworld. Instead, they found themselves surrounded. The human fleet that emerged to meet them was 3 times larger than any intelligence estimate had suggested. But more shocking than the numbers was the composition of the force. Alongside human ships flew vessels from every species that the Council had ever conquered. Vorth engineering ships with weapons they had built in secret. Silicon Lord battle. Platforms that had been hidden in asteroid fields for centuries. Aquatic collective cruisers that had risen from the depths of their ocean worlds. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, now renamed the Use Liberation, and opened a channel to the entire Allied fleet. "High Arbiter Velthus, I am Captain Elena Vasquez, speaking for the Free Worlds Alliance. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Withdraw now, and we will allow your forces to depart safely. Continue this attack, and we will treat it as an act of aggression against over 2,000 free worlds." Velthus stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. 2,000 worlds? That was impossible. The humans had started with 12 systems and a single planet. "This is some kind of trick," he muttered. "Computer, analyze the enemy fleet composition." Analysis complete. His ship's artificial intelligence responded. Enemy force consists of approximately 15,000 vessels representing over 300 different species. Estimated combined firepower exceeds our fleet capability by a factor of 7. Velthus felt something he had never experienced in 4,000 years of life. Fear. Not just for himself, but for the entire galactic order he represented. How had this happened? How had a single species of primitive humans managed to unite half the galaxy against the Council? The answer came from an unexpected source. Elder. Taima of the Vorth broadcast on all frequencies, her flower-like face displaying colors of determination and hope. "High Arbiter, for 3 centuries my people served your empire because we believed we had no choice. Today we learned that there is always a choice. We choose freedom." One by one, other species commanders added their voices. The Silicon Lord Collective spoke of awakening from enforced hibernation. The Aquatic Alliance told of rising from the depths where they had been hiding their true strength. Dozens of species that the Council had thought safely subjugated declared their independence and their alliance with humanity. Velthus realized that the humans hadn't conquered these species. They had liberated them. And in doing so, they had created something the galaxy had never seen. A true alliance of free peoples united not by fear or greed, but by shared values and mutual respect. "All Council ships," Velthus ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Begin. Withdrawal. The war is over." As the Council fleet retreated, Elena looked around her bridge at officers from a dozen different species, working together as equals. The dream that humanity had carried to the stars was finally becoming reality. Ambassador Marcus Chen stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly, representing not the Council of Oppressors, but a true democracy of free worlds. Behind him hung the Charter of the Free Worlds Alliance, written in over 300 languages, and signed by representatives of species that had never before been allowed to speak for themselves. "Members of the Assembly," Marcus began, "6 months ago, humanity tore up a treaty that had kept us enslaved. Today, we offer a new treaty too. The galaxy? Not one that limits or controls, but one that protects and liberates. The Charter of Free Worlds guarantees every intelligent species the right to self-determination, the right to develop their own technology, and the right to choose their own destiny among the stars. The assembly chamber erupted in cheers from representatives of species that had waited centuries for this moment. But Marcus wasn't finished. To those who still believe in rule by force, who think that might makes right, we say this: the age of empires is over. The age of freedom has begun, and humanity will stand with any species that chooses liberty over subjugation, hope over fear, and cooperation over conquest. As the Free Worlds Alliance grew from hundreds of worlds to thousands, as new technologies were shared freely between species, as former slaves became partners in exploring the galaxy, one thing became clear to everyone who witnessed it: the humans hadn't just won a war. They had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization itself, and they had done it not through conquest or intimidation, but by remembering what they had always been at their core: a species that refused to accept that freedom was impossible, that believed every intelligent being deserved the chance to reach for the stars, and that would fight against any force that tried to keep others in chains. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in its history, that was a good thing. Asterisk.